1945, the US, the UK and the Soviet Union met to shape the new world. 7 years on, he was born in what was then Leningrad and is now St. Petersburg. By the 70s, Putin had studied law and then joined the Russian Secret Service, the KGB. At this time, the Soviet Union's influence reached across the communist nations of Eastern Europe. And in the 80s, Putin was posted to Dresden in East Germany. From there, he witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of communism. This was a visceral example of people power. To Putin, though, the demise of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. And while that demise was negotiated, Putin was heading home to find a place for himself in the new Russia. Russia's president in the 90s, Boris Yeltsin, would help him do that. He made Putin head of the security services. Then Putin was elected prime minister. Then, in 1999, Yeltsin resigned, Putin was president, and his way of operating was clear from the start.
Tightening the grip over media was one of the first things that he did, and also the lack of genuine opposition, because his critics either have been in exile or dead or facing prosecution.
Putin's focus on his own power and wealth was relentless. By 2008, when his 2 terms were up, Dmitry Medvedev replaced him as president, but Putin became prime minister and everyone knew who was in charge. By 2012, he was back as president again. And Putin's indifference to democracy is matched by his view of sovereignty. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia to support separatists. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. It supported separatists in eastern Ukraine. And in 2018, the former Russian Secret Service operative was poisoned in Salisbury. The UK says Russian intelligence was responsible. To Putin, the rules are for him to make. He said as much himself.
I hope no one will cross Russia's red line, but in each case we are the ones who will decide where the red line is.
And Russia's right to decide roots back to Putin's view of what he's seen in his lifetime. In 2015, he addressed the UN and said, instead of the triumph of democracy and progress, we got violence, poverty and social disaster. Nobody cares a bit about human rights. Putin's contempt was directed at Western democracy. We've seen, though, how little he cares for democracy in Russia and Ukraine. Despite this, years earlier, the West talked of trusting him.
I'll answer the question. I looked the man in the eye. I found it to be very straightforward. I was able to get a sense of his soul.
We're getting a sense of it too this week, as we did a few years ago when Putin spoke of his childhood, telling us, 50 years ago, the Leningrad street taught me a rule. If a fight is inevitable, you have to throw the first punch. There was nothing inevitable about this week, but Ukraine has felt that first punch. A punch Putin justifies in his country's interests, but which very much serve his. And as we've watched the violence, I think back to that criticism of the West at the UN in 2015. Putin said, I'm urged to ask those who created this situation, do you at least realize now what you've done? The world is now asking the same of him, and everything about Putin's life suggests, yes, he does realize what he's done.